and type and send a message to everyone about where you're from and say hi. You will be using the chat to ask questions and make comments since your audio will remain muted. So might as well get some practicing in. Thank you. Well, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our program, Community Cookbooks, Sharing Family Recipes Through the Generations, sponsored by the UIKAI Senior Center and the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. For those of you who are not familiar with the sponsoring organizations, let me mention that the UIKAI's mission is to promote healthy aging and successful independent living and to advocate for all seniors while embracing Japanese American traditions. It offers a variety of services and activities that empower seniors to age well and thrive. The Japanese American Museum of San Jose's mission is to collect, preserve, and share Japanese American history, culture, and art with a focus on the greater Bay Area. It offers exhibits, public programs, and various community projects and activities. By the way, my name is Tom Izu. I forgot to introduce myself, and I'm a volunteer with the UIKAI and the Japanese American Museum. A few years ago, some of us volunteers with the UIKAI wanted to help ensure that the next generation of seniors, including those who are already seniors but in denial, stay connected and active in the community. And we started to create experimental events to try to make this happen. One thing we discovered was that a common ingredient in many of the most popular of these events were ones that featured food, and not just food from stores or restaurants, but dishes made from recipes culled from well-worn and stained community cookbooks. It seemed this style of cooking, sharing, and eating was an important social glue, a sort of community stickiness, so ever-present as to be almost invisible. Erin Nishimura, a volunteer with the Japanese American Museum of San Jose, mentioned an article entitled Community Cookbooks, Asian American Food Selfies that she happened to come across and wondered if we could use it to create a joint public program between UIKAI and the museum, since the museum was interested in bringing out untold stories of our community's history and culture. And so, as they say, the rest is history. And here we are today, ready to explore the world of Japanese American community cookbooks. Next slide, please. This afternoon, it's a great pleasure to introduce Nina Ichikawa, who will share her thoughts about community cookbooks and what they mean for us. Nina is the executive director of the Berkeley Food Institute. She's previously served in the office of U.S. Senator Daniel Inouye and with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's initiative, Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food. She was also named a Food and Community Fellow by the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. Serving as the founding food and agricultural editor for Hyphen magazine, her writings on our changing food system have been published widely, including by Al Jazeera America, NBC Asian America, Rafu Shimpo, Grist, and Civil Eats. But perhaps the most impressive out of an already very impressive resume is her additional experience as a restaurant dishwasher. Her work making corsages at her family's 107-year-old flower shop, and her efforts in helping to establish the very first for our country's high school class on Asian American Studies. Sounds like something we should explore at a future event. Nina received a BA in Interdisciplinary Studies, Food Policy from UC Berkeley, an MA in International Relations, Food Policy from Meiji Gakuin University in Tokyo. She volunteers for the California Farm Justice Collaborative, the Center for Urban Education on Sustainable Agriculture, and with the Japanese American Women Alumni of UC Berkeley. Please welcome Nina Ichikawa.
Thank you so much, Tom. Let me just make sure I'm set up right. Hi everyone. I wish I could see you all. I really appreciate being invited, and this is such a fun and great event. I'm such a fan of Japanese American Museum of San Jose, and it's great to hear about UIKAI and what you all are doing. So again, thank you for having me. And what I'll do in today's lecture, I guess, is just take you through the article I wrote that is how we all found each other. And then we'll do Q&A, and then I look forward to watching some of the videos that I hear the members sharing of your own cooking experiences. So this article, Community Cookbooks, Asian American Food Selfies, I published in 2015 for a special project called Off the Menu with PBS. So if you want to read the whole article, just, I guess, Google that title. and it should come up. I'll talk a little bit at the end. I'll show the project it was a part of, and there was a movie there and a lot of fun resources if you want to go deeper. Next slide, please. Here's what I'll go over about community cookbooks today. I'm going to talk about their history, definition, purposes, and ask together if we still need them and what they might look like in the future. They're often seen as a sort of historical relic, but I think that they have a great potential for the future. Next slide, please. As I tried to cover in my article, community cookbooks have been around for a long time. They began in the US around the Civil War, and they've always been very localized, and we fall into that. Asian American and Japanese American community cookbooks fall into that history. In my article, I interviewed a community cookbook historian who sort of helped me put it in context. She also explained that their popularity really peaked in the 1950s to 1980s when certain national companies put out these templates to have it be very easy to, do group creation and group publication of these cookbooks. Although searching this past week, I actually found those companies are still in existence. I don't know what happened since the 80s, I guess the internet. But if people still want to produce them in this kind of ring binder format, you still can. Modern day equivalents might be websites like Blurb, where you can make your own book, or even a lot of people are putting them out now on Google Docs or, using Microsoft Office templates, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of formats, and they've changed format over the years, but it's very hard to trace their exact beginning because they've always sprung up naturally out of communities. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite community cookbooks that has become embarrassed. It's so dirty, but that means it's well used. That's from Japanese American Services of the East Bay, and this is one, I grew up in Berkeley, and this is one that we've used a lot in a group that we're very grateful for. So I'll ask in my presentation today, why do we make these? What function do they play? Sorry, I'm looking at my other screen, which has my notes, so pardon me. Why do we even like them? And also question, what does it mean that they went online? And we can talk about what that means and how that affects us as a community. Well, the first reason why I found community cookbooks to be so interesting, once I started diving in deeper, just to give you some background, as I explained in the article, I was just a regular person, a mixed Japanese American kid growing up here in the Bay Area when and community cookbooks didn't play an important function in my life, except for on holidays or special occasions when our family sort of desperately opened them up and tried to find all the traditional recipes that we may have forgotten. And I mentioned in my article that recipes like ozoni at New Year's, frankly, might have been hard to keep up if we didn't have these community cookbooks, because we couldn't find online, and these were not typical everyday foods that we remembered easily. So when I was assigned to write the story, I kind of started digging in deeper and thinking about it in a way I hadn't really thought about as just a casual user of these books. Next slide, please. So one of the first things that I really noticed that excited me was, and I said, this is a quote from an article, I said, in community cookbooks, we picked our own heroes and they picked the recipes that sustain them. So one of the ones that I mentioned was the Darumonogakko cookbook. I don't know, is there anyone in this audience who went to Darumonogakko, which is a really great Japanese American summer school in El Cerrito, Richmond, California, and every year, or for many years, sold a community cookbook as a fundraiser. And when I started poking into the back of the cookbook, they often solicited celebrity recipes. And I said, oh great, let's see what celebrities they picked. Did they try to get, let's see, was it Britney Spears or, Kim Kardashian? Oh no, it was Min Yasui, Hiroshi Kashiwagi, Wendy Takuda. And it was so refreshing to find recipes from who we determined are our heroes and our celebrities. So I thought that was, an unappreciated strong point of community cookbooks. Next slide, please. Another thing that I thought was really important about community cookbooks is that they explained how our community grew and shared connections with other communities. This is actually a page from a great book on African American cookbooks called the Jemima Code. And this is from a community cookbook from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Home Economics Department of Rufus King High School. And the book was called Cooking with Soul, Favorite Recipes of Negro Homemakers, 1968. And you can see the young guy grinding the ice cream in the lower picture. And, you know, they look a lot like Japanese American community cookbooks. And I was struck also looking through Japanese American community cookbooks, and this has been written about by Valerie Matsumoto and others, how we incorporated recipes of our neighbors into our books. So she said about how some authors, you know, they wrote about, you know, deep dish apple pie, which they learned from African-American neighbors, or, you know, chow mein, which came from Chinese American neighbors and relatives. And as our community grew, expanded, and incorporated new people, wonderfully, our cookbooks also expanded. So I think that community cookbooks are a way that we kind of told that natural story as it developed, and is a sort of a very beautiful connection of partnership with others. And I really recommend the Jemima Code if you're into cookbooks, because it's a really fun read and beautiful pictures. Next slide, please. Fundraising is another huge reason why we do community cookbooks. This is a Obama 2008 chirashi zushi that my mother made. My mother, Betty Kano in Berkeley, and she couldn't attend today, but I just really want to shout out her creativity and hard work on this. She did this for an Asian American and Pacific Islanders for Obama fundraiser back in, I guess, early 2008. And I was living overseas, but she sent me these photos, and I thought it was so amazing. And so, you know, this was of course, we cook for fundraisers, but we also produce these community cookbooks as their own fundraisers. And whatever top, you know, issue of the day, whether it be an election or redress and reparations or rebuilding a temple or church or anything else we have needed to do, community cookbooks have served that really important function of getting people together and helping us to do fundraising. So next slide, please. Something else that I think is really important, and this is a photo from our family's New Year's, including my aunt's very special layered Jell-O, and these are some of the recipes that, you know, we don't want to forget. And as you can see, everyone's standing around taking pictures in the back. It's just as important, it seems, to take the pictures as it is to eat it. But, you know, over time, community cookbooks have saved these family memories. And what I think is so special about them, you know, as opposed to cookbooks that you buy off the shelf, is, you know, you can really see people's idiosyncratic family memories of, you know, something that one person loved, or something that was, you know, easy to cook, or if they were on a farm, they often had many variations on one theme, if that was the crop that they grew. So, you know, I really appreciate that. They also reflect, you know, conditions people were going through. I'll read from my article. The cookbooks also reveal the economic ups and downs of working families. From the introduction to the Philadelphia Japanese American Citizens League's cookbook, which was published in 2003, it writes, "In this time of daily crisis and high cost of food, today's cooks have nothing to laugh about. No time or expense was wasted in experimenting with untried recipes." Community cookbooks are eminently practical, usually aimed at saving money or getting family members to eat more healthily. Each recipe has been tested by a home cook and further tested by countless eaters at potlucks, holidays, and birthdays. So I think for that reason, in many ways, they're much stronger and higher quality than a recipe you can just find online, because there's all kinds of high and low quality recipes online. And when you just do a simple internet search, as any of you may have experienced, sometimes the quality is sort of iffy. And in contrast, a community cookbook, you know that a real human, and probably many of them, have tested and tried these, tried out these recipes. Next slide, please. You know, I think another great function of them, and this is sort of turning into a sales pitch for community cookbooks, but I guess that's how my article turned out to be, is that I think that they're really great for keeping culture alive and passing on stories. This was from one of my favorite community cookbooks, and, you know, recipe for kibidango, and if you look down there at the bottom, it also describes, you know, its connection to folk tales, and, you know, what does this mean? if you look on the ingredients, of course, it uses ingredients like sweet rice, which is maybe more of a special occasion ingredient, as well as millet, which is a very traditional Japanese ingredient that a lot of people don't eat in modern times, even in Japan. And in the United States, it's often used more as even bird seed. It's not even appreciated as a food, but it's a really healthy and traditional food from Japan. So I was struck by how we have an ability to keep eating these foods if we find the recipes and use them from community cookbooks. And you can see how practical and helpful this recipe is. It talks about comparing, do it the size of a ping pong ball, keep your hands damp, all kinds of different tricks to make it easier that might be hard to figure out by yourself. And to me, it reads like, a relative is explaining it to you right there by your side. And I think that's really nice. Next slide, please. Here's another reason why I think community cookbooks are really appreciated. And I said it's for sheer survival. I'm a working mom. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. You might hear them screaming during this presentation. And, we're all going through really hard times right now with the pandemic, with wildfires here on the West Coast. And I really appreciate that. Of course, this is not the first hard times our community has been through. And thinking about, what our ancestors went through, and I turn to the recipes to, I guess, reassure me, and also think that someone else may have had to make chicken in a hurry. I'm not the only one cooking in a hurry or trying to figure out what to get on the table. And very simple, practical recipes like this that incorporate, canned food and other, things you can have in your pantry, I think are so valuable. And when I read them and use them, I feel a connection to a busy mom of the past. I keep a picture on my wall of my great grandmother with her 5 children because I only have 2. And whenever I think it's difficult, I try to remember that it's not actually difficult because I don't have 5. And chicken in a hurry, I only have to do for 2 kids and a husband. So I appreciate those historical reminders. Let's see. Next slide, please. So I just excerpted a little bit here from my article. How will future generations eat? Not what they aspire to eat or write on restaurant menus. Day in, day out, eating life will be built from what we cook at home. Scattered across the world, we're still cooking with neighbors, hunting for recipes, and hoping to save some old-time tastes and pass them on. The internet is great, but I don't get how food blogs can be passed on to grandchildren or survive hurricanes or be written from prison. And indeed, I really do think, and I spend a lot of time with both paper and internet versions of either community cookbooks or professionally produced cookbooks. And there just is really something timeless and shareable about these paper versions. There's something, of course, they're more expensive to produce, and some would argue it's, wasting paper or something like that. But I do think in terms of permanence and again, being able to pass them on and being able to both produce and use them under duress, I think printed cookbooks, are really unparalleled. And recently, the sales of professionally printed cookbooks have been through the roof for many years. It's increased since the pandemic, but statistics show that about every year there's about a 20% increase in cookbook sales, which is really amazing. And so people are already, and maybe you're also in this category, already buying cookbooks from your local bookstore, Barnes and Noble, etc. But the power of community cookbooks is that they reflect our community, and we know that we will see our families and our stories in their pages. So I really encourage you, if you have a community cookbook in your closet, basement, or somewhere else, please save it. Please use it. Please share it with others. Cherish them. These are such precious, really homemade history books, and primary source materials of how our community has evolved. And, you know, if you have the resources and the time, try to produce what you can in terms of making new community cookbooks. And if you can, to make them on paper or make them bound, because I think that, again, there's really a shareable quality to be able to touch them and use them and not know that you're clicking and you're going to end up in games or social media in the end, but that you're actually just experiencing reading them and then cooking from them. So as I start to wind up my talk, next slide, please. I'll just share with you a little bit of, if you're interested in this topic for further reading and watching, the icon on the left is from a book that I have an essay in. It's called Eating Asian America, a Food Studies Reader. And that's where the article by Valerie Matsumoto about community connections through food is that I really liked. And I have my articles about Asian American farmers and grocers. So it's a little different. But it's a tour through a lot of different Asian American food topics. So that's our book I recommend if you're interested in this. Another area to go further in is, so my article was published actually as part of the companion website for a really great documentary called Off the Menu, Asian America, and it's on PBS. And I really recommend it. It's by Grace Lee. She's an amazing filmmaker if you've ever seen her stuff. It's about an hour long. And I fear many people haven't seen it. It came out in 2015, but I just gave a screenshot of the website. And if you can track it down on the website or somewhere else, it's really a beautiful film. And it really tells about what food has meant for different Asian American communities. So on the website, you can see the video, and you can also read my article in full and read articles by others that were sort of additional content after the film was released. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide. This is ways that, you know, we can stay in touch. Sometimes I'm doing writing or public speaking that's either related to my job at UC Berkeley or on my own. And if you're on Twitter or Instagram, I'd love to see you there. And this is a page from a small community cookbook, a family cookbook I made as a school project in undergrad. And it was I tried to learn from my grandmother, my now late grandmother, you know, some of my favorite recipes that I love to eat of her food. So I spent a winter break, you know, studying from her and hearing her stories and writing them down. And I'm just so glad I did it. Of course, no one saw this outside of my family, but it for me, it formed a foundation of certain recipes that I knew how to cook, you know, home style recipes. And plus, you know, her nutrition tips, as you can see, her belief in gobo as a healing vegetable. And and so I pulled this out of storage to share with you because I had a lot of fun making it back when I was an undergrad and had a lot of time. But for those of you who are inspired or have time, I definitely recommend for you to also produce your own and write down your own family recipes and share them with each other before they're lost. So that's all for my talk, and I'm happy to take any questions. I see folks have been writing in the chat, but I guess someone will sort through and tell me which questions I should answer. Is that right?
Thank you, Nina. And now is a chance to ask questions for Nina. And so please write your questions or comments in the chat function. We'll cover as many as we can. Just to start off with, Nina, I will ask you this, I was very moved by what you said about cookbooks and how it's like when you have a physical cookbook and it's been passed down, it's like having one of your ancestors giving you these little helpful techniques and hints how to do something exactly right, which you just don't necessarily see on the internet. So my question is what do you think the future is of these cookbooks and the younger generations of people who identify as Japanese Americans? How are they looking at home cooking? And what do you think, do you think this generational sharing will continue through this process that you described?
Well, I hope so. I mean, let's make cookbooks now, you know, let's make pandemic cookbooks and, you know, fire season cookbooks, you know, let's express to the future what we're going through right now. And, you know, let's also be honest about what we're cooking now, and we don't have to feel, you know, shame if we're taking shortcuts like the author of Chicken in a Hurry was, or, you know, we can let's express, I think if we feel appreciation for this culture that was made in the past, then let's try to make culture in the present that can go into the future. And I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah, I have a question from Judy Sugiyama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what's your favorite recipe? She asks.
Oh gosh. Well, it varies because sometimes I have a lot of energy for cooking and sometimes I don't. Does anyone else feel the same way, especially during these shelter-in-place times? So I go through waves. But I think now in the summer, you know, I love hiyashi chuka, like the cold noodles, sort of Chinese style cold noodles with the different, you know, ham or chicken and egg and ginger and other things on top. I posted one on my Instagram recently that I made for my family that was, I was ashamed. It did not look beautiful, but it tasted good. And I've been trying to make the sauce from scratch instead of buying the instant one. So I would say now that it's still warm weather in summer and early fall, I seem to eat a lot of cold noodles.
Thank you, Nina. I feel the same way. I have one question. Let's see, it's from, somebody is asking about the film you mentioned on PBS. What's the name of the film again?
It's called Off the Menu. So if you search Off the Menu PBS, I think it should come up.
And there's another one from Carolyn Fitz, who I agree with. She loves the stains on a well-loved cookbook. I felt bad because some of our cookbooks in our house here have all sorts of stains, and some of them may not have been for me, but some of the recent ones I can tell already. So
that's great. It shows it's well loved. Here is my Darumonogakko cookbook with a repaired binding, and you can see you can see what's really fun is they have the kids do. You know, kids do the art for inside, and that's also so cute.
So keep adding your questions. I have one from Pam Yoshida. What are your thoughts on fusion recipes?
Yeah, I think everything is fusion. So it's sort of hard for me to delineate where does fusion end or begin. You know, Japan is a fusion. Japanese Americans are a fusion. So I don't know. I'm a fusion. Everything is a fusion. I mean, so much of food in modern day, or so much of food even in ancient Japan came from China, came from Korea. You know, we as Japanese Americans actually have preserved, I think, some old time traditional recipes just because for those of us that immigrated, you know, before the war and in the early part of the 20th century, as my family did, we have almost a time capsule of a very old Japan. I think for those of us who have been to Japan in modern times, you might be surprised by it's even more fusion than we are. Yeah. In terms of what they eat there. So I think fusion is inescapable.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's a good thing to think about because sometimes people want to look at Japanese Americans and our history as like we're just frozen in time, but we came from somewhere and we're in the process of changing what we think our culture is. Exactly. So I think I never thought of looking at cookbooks that way. That's yeah. Really fascinating.
They're sort of, you know, they're a very honest reflection of how cultures change. You know, some people may have an image they're trying to protect of what's happening, but you know, cookbooks kind of tell the truth of what's actually happening. So I appreciate that.
I have another question for you, Nina. It's from Leah Sarano. Do you have any recommended resources for cookbook creation / printing, and also where to purchase or find older community cookbooks?
Oh, great question. Oh, very interesting question. Well, for finding older cookbooks, I have found that, you know, people sell them online, probably at exorbitant prices, like on eBay and stuff. If you Google it, people are selling them online. You know, I've found great ones at estate sales and garage sales. So I always keep my eyes peeled for those. Of course, fundraisers as well. Like I happened to go to a JACL thing when I was in Philadelphia, and that's where, you know, they were selling their own cookbook for $5. I was like, of course, you know, I have to have it. So I think just showing when we're allowed to travel or be at events again, you know, just showing up at and making sure that you buy them. Yeah, someone just mentioned about yard sales. So absolutely, I would more trust buying them in person there than on the internet because you're never sure what you're going to get. But when I Googled around this week, I did find there's a website called cookbookpublishers.com seems to be one of the oldest one that produced the church cookbook, kind of the standard one. But as I mentioned, I really like also Blurb, and there's other online services where you can put together a book that then comes to you printed. So there's a lot of different services, or again, you can, if you don't care as much how it looks, you can, there are templates also on like Microsoft Word, then you can, just print them out and bind them at the coffee store. That's the low cost route.
Yeah, Amy Funabiki says church bazaars and Obon festivals sell cookbooks. So while you're on one of the festivals, check them out.
Absolutely. And, hey, Amy.
Yeah, it says, another message from Jane says, my sister used blurb.com to make her family cookbook. So that's a recommendation there. I do have one question. I'm not sure, maybe other people can help with this too. Can you tell from cookbooks who invented layered Jell-O? Because this is something everybody always talks about. I think this is Japanese American, and they have debates about that. But have you heard any stories about layered Jell-O?
I don't know. My cousin Janice Adachi makes the best in the world, and I have to shout it. That was her layered Jell-O in my photo. That's a great question. I mean, there are lots of complex gelatin and, kanten desserts in Japan. And I think layered Jell-O is such a great example of a Japanese aesthetic made American. So, yeah, I don't think I have never heard who is the exact inventor, but I think it's such a beautiful expression of a style we have that we adjusted it for the United States.
Well, it's a mystery to be solved. So everybody out there, let's get to work. And
I think we'd have a lot of humility and many people saying they didn't invent it when they didn't.
Let's see, one other question. It's from Judy again. I think she was asking about, well, what do you think about millennials? Millennials, how do you see them thinking about community cookbooks in the future?
I don't know. You gotta ask one. I'm definitely too old to be a millennial. I don't know. Why don't we invite a millennial on next time? I mean, I know Instagram, people are doing a lot of recipe sharing on Instagram, but that's a great question for a millennial.
Yeah, I think we're just about out of time. So let me say this. I really thank you, Nina. Even though it's difficult to see how we feel in this virtual environment, know that we're all very deeply appreciative of your talk and recognition of community cookbooks. I think that's a really big thing, is that you're helping us recognize how valuable they are.
Great.
We do have some token of your showing our appreciation. These are all called from the UI Kai and the Japanese American Museum. Do you see those little scrubbers there?
Yes.
To me, those are my favorite.
Me too.
So
thank you so much.
You can't get them anywhere else. So
wow, thank you all so much. And is that a UI Kai's cookbook in the back?
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Worth its weight in gold. Wow, thank you all so much for having me, and thank you for picking my article out of obscurity and inviting me to this. Yeah, I love what you all are doing, and let's all stay in touch in these difficult times. And I'll just say last thing, please make sure that you check your registration and get out to vote as early as you can. So anyway, thanks so much, Tom, and everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Okay, next slide, please. We're going to move now into the second half of our program. I'm sorry that it might be very disappointing that we can't dig into some wonderful home-cooked gochiso about now, as we usually would do during our freshman break before the pandemic kicked in. And I know it is especially difficult after you probably started to daydream about your own favorites, Obachan made for you. But we have tried to do the next best thing. Filmed in their own shelter-in-place home and kitchen studios and making their very first debut as social media cooking celebrities is an all-star cast of our own UI Kai lecture series volunteers who will share their favorite family or community cookbook found recipes. Let's now view what they have cooked up for us. And all you need to do is imagine the smells and the tastes. But before I forget, recipes will be sent to all of you who have RSVP'd for this event. so you don't have to miss anything due to trying desperately to write it all down as you watch. So instead, just sit back and watch and enjoy. Okay, why don't we go on to our videos?
Hi, my name is Margaret Tamita, and I'd like to share one of the most popular salads in our community cookbooks, Chinese chicken salad. I'll share some information on the origin of the dish and demonstrate the way I make Chinese chicken salad based on our family recipes. Do you think that Chinese chicken salad came from China? The Chinese don't eat their vegetables raw, they cook them, saute, boil, stir fry. Fresh lettuce salad was never part of Chinese cuisine. If it was not from China, where was it invented? It's a California invention. Madame Wu says she invented Chinese chicken salad at a restaurant in Santa Monica, California. She claims Cary Grant requested that she put the salad on her menu. Ming's restaurant in Palo Alto also claims it invented the salad. Sunset Magazine published the Ming's recipe in 1970. I first ate Chinese chicken salad over 30 years ago when my sister-in-law Helen brought it for New Year's. Notice that the chicken salad in the back is almost gone, ready for a refill. Helen's recipe for dressing is similar to the recipe from Suzume no Gakko. We don't usually use dressing at New Year's, but on other occasions we add salad dressing. We substitute wonton strips for the maifoon and omit the 1 tablespoon of MSG. Remember to use dressing lightly so your salad will remain crisp and crunchy. Tabitha will share our family's ingredients for Chinese chicken salad. We use romaine lettuce and iceberg lettuce. Iceberg because it is crispy and romaine for its dark color. Did you know that romaine has twice the amount of vitamin K and 4 times the amount of vitamin A? Purple cabbage for color and sometimes red ginger for color. Snow peas and green onions. Since I don't use dressing, I flavor the chicken with salt and pepper, sesame oil, and sesame seeds. We also add slivered almonds. You can buy wonton strips, but I fry my own. Tabitha, what's the difference between the two?
The store-bought ones are saltier and smaller than my grandma's homemade ones.
We don't use maifoon because it tastes greasy. You can use your own salad dressing or store-bought dressing. Let's make Chinese chicken salad.
Don't worry, my hands are clean.
Half iceberg lettuce and half romaine lettuce. Purple cabbage, snow peas, green onion, slivered almonds, and sesame seeds. Chicken. Add salt and pepper to taste. And last, wonton strips. It's ready to toss. Now for the taste test. How does it taste?
Delicious.
Chinese chicken salad is the perfect fit for our COVID-19 lifestyle. No need to make an extra trip to the grocery store. Just look in your refrigerator. You have leftover chicken, and if you don't have leftover chicken, just use your Instant Pot. Take a frozen chicken breast, add 1 cup of water, and set it at high pressure for 10 minutes. Use any combination of salad greens, and you also have on hand either your bottle dressing or your homemade dressing. These wonton skins are also handy to have at home. So the next time you ask yourself, what shall I cook for dinner? Try a new variation of Chinese chicken salad from a community cookbook. Your family will be so glad that you did.
Hello, I'm Jane Kawasaki, and I'm going to share a traditional Japanese dish called horenso, or spinach shiraae. Shiraae is an example of shojin ryori, a cooking style that became popular with the spread of Zen Buddhism in Japan in the 13th century. These dishes adhere to the principles of Buddhism by avoiding animal products and pungent flavors like garlic and onion, and are believed to bring balance and alignment to the body, mind, and spirit. Shiraae translates to white dressing, which describes the creamy dressing made of mashed tofu, shiro or white miso, sesame seeds, and sugar that's used to flavor various types of parboiled vegetables. Horenso shiraae evokes memories of my childhood and stories that my mom told us about my grandfather, who was a tofu maker during World War II, who miraculously survived the atomic bombing in Hiroshima because he was protected by the cement walls of the tofu factory where he was finishing up his workday. As Margaret mentioned in her video about the Chinese not eating raw vegetables, that same practice, I think, carried over to Japan because shiraae was the closest thing that my mom made that resembled salad. We had shiraae often when we were growing up, and my sister and I always jumped at the chance to help because it meant we got to grind the sesame seeds in the suribachi, or Japanese mortar, and most importantly, lick the sweet, savory, and nutty dressing that was left in the grooves of the suribachi after the dish was made. Next slide. Yeah, my mom never had a written recipe for this dish, so I was happy to find this one in the 1986 Centenary Favorites Cookbook from Los Angeles that I received as a bridal shower gift. You'll notice the recipe calls for MSG, which had a bad rap for a number of years, but has now been cleared again. Because of that controversy, when I started making this dish on my own, I substituted by using dashi, either bonito or kombu based instead. Now let's see how we make this easy dish. Let's make horenso, or spinach shiraae today. So for this recipe, the main ingredient is spinach. So here's 2 bunches of spinach with the stems attached for substance. Use a cake of tofu, 2 tablespoons of shiro miso, 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds, 2 tablespoons of sugar, some dashi, and my grandma's special ingredient, a couple of drops of sesame oil. About 30 minutes before you start assembling the shiraae, you want to drain the tofu so that you remove the excess moisture. So I generally cut the tofu into 4 flatter slices. I cover it with a paper towel, put it in a sink where it can drain, put some weight on it, and let it sit for 30 minutes. While the tofu is draining, let's prep the spinach. So first you want to wash the spinach really well because you want to get all the sand and grit out of it. Then you want to boil a little bit of water in a large wide pot, and then you just want to plop all the spinach in, stem side first, and just stir it around for a minute. It just takes a little while for it to parboil and get tender enough to put into the shiraae. Okay, now the spinach is parboiled and we want to drain it before it gets too soggy. So you put it in the colander, rinse it with some cold water. Then you squeeze out the excess water from the spinach, like this. so now we're ready to assemble the shirai. So let's start by grinding some roasted sesame seeds. After the sesame seeds are ground up a little bit, we add some miso and sugar and mix that all together to form a paste. Then let's add a little bit of kombu dashi. And then we're going to put in our tofu, nice and squeezed out. And add a couple drops of sesame oil. Oh, that smells so good. And that's the sauce. Okay, now let's add the spinach. So let's chop it up into 1-inch pieces. And mix it gently into the sauce. Okay, and when it's mixed, let's just serve. And there's the finished dish, and here's the bowl for licking.
That looked great, Jane. Thanks a lot. My name is Kathy Higuchi, and I'll be sharing a recipe for sweet and sour chicken wings. I picked this particular dish because it always reminds me of my Auntie Ida, who lived in Skokie, Illinois, and how community cookbooks can keep us connected. As with so many Nisei, my aunt and her husband were among the many that remained in the Midwest after leaving the internment camps and raised their families in mostly non-Asian communities. Even then, though, Japanese American enclaves sprang up, and invariably, so did the community cookbooks. So even in Skokie, Illinois, my aunt had access to Asian recipes, both traditional and new, and often shared them with my mom, who lived in Watsonville, California. They were both wonderful cooks, and whenever I thumb through my mom's stack of well-worn community cookbooks, I think of their recipe exchanges. Anyway, it was my Auntie Ida who discovered the sweet and sour chicken wings recipe, and it continues to be a crowd pleaser at potlucks and family gatherings, even showing up at our last pre-pandemic family party as shown in this photo. Next slide, please. So not surprisingly, I found a very similar recipe in the Wesley Church Women's Cookbook, our treasured recipes, I think back in 1981, which I'll be sharing today. So please, on to the video. Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make sweet and sour chicken wings. You'll need about 1 dozen wings, some potato starch, eggs, and oil for frying, MSG, garlic powder, and salt for seasoning the wings, and some sesame seeds. For the sauce, 3 tablespoons ketchup, 1/2 cup Japanese rice vinegar, 3/4 cup sugar, 1 tablespoon soy sauce, 1 teaspoon MSG, 1/2 teaspoon salt, and 1/4 cup chicken broth, which we'll make with the chicken wing tips. Let's get started with prepping the chicken wings. Just cut off the tip, then move your knife down between the wingette and drumette and cut right through the joint. From a dozen wings, you'll get 12 wingettes, 12 drumettes, and 12 tips. We'll season the wings with garlic powder, salt, and MSG. As Jane mentioned earlier, MSG got a bad rap in the 70s, but the Chinese restaurant syndrome attributed to MSG has since been debunked. However, if you want to leave it out, it's perfectly okay. Let the wings sit for about 20 minutes. We'll use these wing tips to make chicken broth for the sweet and sour sauce. Just cover the wing tips with water, bring it to a boil, and simmer it while you wait for the chicken wings to marinate. It's been about 20 minutes, and now that the chicken broth is ready, we can make the sweet and sour sauce. I start by whisking the vinegar and ketchup together so the ketchup won't clump. Add the sugar, soy sauce, MSG, and salt, and finally the chicken broth. Simmer until the sugar has dissolved. Put it aside until we're ready to pour it over the chicken. Now for the frying. I poured about 1/4 inch of oil into my electric frying pan set at 325 degrees. I have one dish with a 1/2 cup of potato starch and one with 2 beaten eggs. You can always add more if needed. Next, coat the wings in the potato starch and then dip into the eggs. Shake off any excess egg and then into the frying pan. Once they've been cooking for 2 to 3 minutes, check to see if they are golden brown, and then turn them over. Watch out for grease spurts. When they are nice and brown on both sides, remove them and let them drain on a wire rack or paper towels. Place the wings in a single layer in a casserole dish. Now I'll pour the sauce over the wings. Pop it into a 325-degree oven, in this case a toaster oven. We will check back in 15 minutes to see if they are ready to turn over. It's been about 15 minutes, so let's check to see how they're doing. The sauce is bubbling away, which is just how it's supposed to be. We'll turn each wing over so both sides are well coated. Once they've all been coated, sprinkle them with sesame seeds. Give the pan a shake and return the pan to the oven. We just removed the chicken from the oven and the sauce is perfect. This is how the chicken should look, really well coated. I like to turn them over a couple of times to completely coat both sides. Now for a final touch. And here you have sweet and sour chicken wings. Itadakimasu!
Hi, my name is Ladani Yumori Kaku, and I'm very excited to be here and share a recipe from our Yumori family cookbook. We're going to be making a layered rice, so I'm going to go ahead and JAMsj matsure the rice. Okay, so you want to, so it's fluffy. All right, so this recipe is very easy. We're going to take, this was 5 cups of rice, and we're taking half of it, and we're going to put it in this glass pan, and we're going to pat it down. All right, and so you're going to pat this down. So what I've done is already bought different kind of tsukemono that is already cut. So I like to use this takuwan, and so normally I would be using my fingers, but today we're going to just splatter it. Okay, so no particular order, just color in that sense. All right, and then the second one I'm going to add is, this is called konbun, and so we're going to add this, and this adds a different flavor. This is going to be covered by a second layer of rice. Okay, so you just want to make it kind of even so every piece has a little bit of the flavor. And these can be bought at the Japanese grocery store. All right, so there we've got it. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the next layer of rice. So you can see this is a very quick recipe. It serves a lot of people in that sense. All right, so I've got my second layer of rice. Oh, got a little guy there, so we'll just bury it. There you go. You can see how easy this is. All right, you want to just fill up the patch. Now, this next layer, you're going to put the tsukemono, but you're also going to add the furikake. So this is prepared seaweed, and just be liberal with this. Okay. This is the pickled scallion, rakkyo. Okay, and some, I call it the red skimono. You'll see the recipe and the Japanese words. Sorry, being a sansei, my Japanese is so-so here. All right, this is the one we use for curry. So there we go. So this is, oops, this is one I didn't use, but there are all kinds of skimono, but I thought that I would like red instead. So this is the actual dish that we're ready to serve, right? And I want to get my second one. So what I did was already prepare it so you can see the different colors. So this is using the purple skimono, and that's going to have a different taste, but you can see the presentation. And what we do is we serve it, this is shoga, the red ginger. My husband likes that, so that if you're ready to eat this, you could go ahead and serve yourself some. And you could see the color, it will taste oishi desu. And you could also add a little bit of ginger. There you go. Okay, so you're ready to eat this along with your other food. Or what you can do too is take this and go ahead and say that you had leftovers and you refrigerated it. Then you have some of the harder rice. And so don't throw it away. I have this in a bowl, and I've already put green tea, and you can just add the green tea, and now you have like an ochazuke. So this will be great to have for a snack, and I hope that you'll enjoy this family recipe, and you can please add whatever you like.
Okay, now we have a chance to ask our special UI Kai cooks. Thank you to them, the UI Kai cooking team and their tech support helpers. If you could all unmic and show yourselves. First though, let me say this, that the sponsoring organizations would like to inform you that they cannot take responsibility for any damage to your electronic devices you are currently using caused by excessive drooling and the licking of your chops while you watch, and wish you could at least have some of the leftovers. It's sure making me hungry. But please put your questions in the chat, and let's start with this. We have, do any of you have a favorite community cookbook recipe? Let's name some of them in the chat if you don't have a specific question. Do you have any variations on the recipes you see used today? I'm sure there might be big debates about that. Are any questions you are dying to ask in general about our illustrious cooks? You know, like their home studios and how they made these videos, and if they had any stories about that. So please, any questions, just ask, and I'll be checking the chat here. So I do have a question, and these are kind of technical, okay? Kathy, this is something I've had a question about. So when you made your sweet and sour chicken wings, sometimes it'll say use potato starch. What if I don't have potato starch? Can I use flour? Does that mess it up?
You know, I've never tried it with flour, but I'm sure it would be fine. It's just, you know, really fried chicken. But a lot of Asian pantries have cornstarch. So cornstarch is equally as good to use as potato starch. Potato starch, thank you.
I have a question from Joyce. Is the layered rice a sansei creation or something your Nisei or Issei family members made? I think this is for LaDonna.
So it was a recipe from June, and she made it during the 1980s for her daughter's basketball games. So then afterwards they would get food. So we think it might have came from Hawaii, and this was before Spam musubi. So I think probably Spam musubi has replaced, you know, this, but you can add whatever you like. That was the first time I actually made it with konbu. I actually used skimono instead.
Okay, I have a let's see. Oh, Nina says, very professional all. You may need to start your own cooking channel on YouTube. You all ready? Let's see. Let's see, I have another question. Let's see, what does it say? Oh, well, while we're looking at that, Margaret, have you heard of using crumbled instant ramen noodles instead of wontons?
I have not. I think there's so many variations for Chinese chicken salad, but one thing that I'm careful with is cilantro, because some people really don't like it, but I love it. But I always leave it on the side if people like it.
Thank you, Margaret. Another question. Well, let's see. Oh, a comment from Carol. It says, there's a custard bowl dish with seafood veggies that I get at Yako restaurant in Watsonville. Don't know the name, but it's so good. So any of you have heard of custard dishes? I think that's something that we wanted to do, maybe something else, especially about desserts, right? The recipes. Yeah, I'll just remind you, we are going to send out the recipes to everybody, so don't worry about that. Well, let's see. Jane, this is also something that I've run into. What if you don't have fresh spinach? You forgot to get it. Will frozen spinach work, or soft?
Well, you can get packaged baby spinach. Yeah, but frozen is kind of mushy unless you really squeeze it out. So, as my mom says, fresh is good. Fresh is best.
Can I add to that? I happen to have Power Greens from Costco, so I just boiled a little of that. And my sister-in-law who's watching says she has a big bunch of chard in her vegetable garden, so she will use that. So I think any leafy green would be fine.
Actually, I have another.
And you can also use green beans and
right.
like Napa cabbage.
That's right.
It's kind of any parboiled vegetable, but I like it a little bit on the firm side. So I know the frozen spinach is, is like mush. But yeah, any of those packaged leafy greens would be fine.
I have another question for you, Jane, is related to the dish you did. What about the tofu? What kind of tofu? I assume it could be like firm, soft, or any other comments you have about tofu.
Well, so I used Gombe tofu, which is my favorite. It used to be San Jose tofu was what I used. But basically, on the medium firm to firm side is what I use. And you really want to drain it. That's the key thing. You don't want it to be watery.
Would any of you like to share anything about the experience you had? I think we want to encourage people to do a lot of this stuff on their own. And, we're joking about this, but a lot of you have never done something like this and videotaped yourself, and to share this interest in about cooking and using these recipes. So would you like to share anything about your experiences putting these together for our community?
I'll share. This was my first time. I was a little nervous about the whole experience, but Dwayne had given us an outline of what you want to say. And I practiced a little bit at home. I had a student shoot it with 2 cameras, and we did it in 1 take, in that sense. So I just tried to think of talking to you, the audience, of what I was doing. I probably had the simplest recipe to do out of all 4 of them. But anyway, did you guys see the 2 Mickey shamoji paddles?
So, yeah, so as Nina was saying, maybe we should start a UI Kai and JAMsj cooking channel, and you could all star in it, and maybe we can recruit some more people out of this event. Yes. There's a comment I put in here from Arlene. It says, whenever I'm looking for a Japanese American recipe, I go through all my JA cookbooks and compare the recipes. They're usually similar, but to find just the right recipe, you got to try them all. So any comments you have about that? I do think it's
you have a lot of opportunities to cook at home, so try them and find your favorite. And you saw a lot of us have marked up the recipes that we found and figured out what works for us.
Yeah, that goes back to what Nina was saying, why these cookbooks are so important, because you learn this and you put them down, and hopefully you can pass them on the next edition of the cookbook. Another question, Paula Fuji says, can the organizers share the outline, please?
That's that one. 20.
Oh, is that maybe the outline that you use to produce your show, you think? Yeah, so I know you guys made scripts and things like that, and if some of you have them maybe in a format you can share, I think that's what the person is asking.
Oh.
I could.
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to say thank you. You know, a real shout out to Dwayne Kubo and all of the guidance he gave us on how to write a script. You know, time it out, put the verbiage together, and then he took our bits and pieces of video and did his magic. And the music crew, you'll see the acknowledgments at the end. I mean, it really took a village to create these, but we felt really supported for our first time.
I think what we can do, Paula, is we can respond to you directly. We can see what kind of outlines we have and anything anybody like to share, because I think it sounds like it was really a fun activity. So including notes that Dwayne had. Maybe one more question. This is a good one. Which veggies would be best for tsukemono? Any favorites or any? We can start a debate here among you, but best for tsukemono.
Cucumber.
Daikon.
Cabbage. Carrots.
And I think it's what flavor you want, whether it's sweet or tangy or savory, more salty. You know, then I think of the eggplant that's used, or, you know, those kind of vegetables.
Yeah, I think that's our last question. I just wanted to say we did do an event about making pickling and pickled vegetables once, and I think what we decided was the Japanese historically have pretty much pickled anything they can find. So you can probably put that in a cookbook. You know, what kind of vegetables your family traditionally pickled and why. So why don't we move into the next part of our program, and that's. Can I have the next slide, please? Oh, you have it. For the family cookbooks, there it is. Well, thank you all for all of our UI Kai cooks. Now let's go back to talking about cookbooks, but this time focus on self-published family cookbooks. Those put together by family members themselves in order to make sure the recipes and stories connected to them are passed on down the generations. To help us get started, we bring back Jane Kawasaki to talk about her own family's cookbook. She will be followed by a short video made by Ladana Yumorikaku about stories from her own family's cookbook. So Jane, are you ready?
Okay, so if you attended the lecture series Oshogatsu event in 2018, you may have seen our family cookbook. It's called Oshogatsu at Bachan's, because from the first New Year's after she arrived in the US in 1954, my mom has been in charge of making the Oshogatsu New Year's feast, and it's always the biggest event of the year for our family. The menu is full of dishes that symbolize prosperity and good health for the new year, and traditional Japanese favorites that take days to shop for and prepare. 10 years ago, my sister Linda undertook the project of compiling these special recipes into a beautiful bound volume. And we learned, I think she used blurb.com and took pictures and shared them with all of the grandkids so that we could carry on the tradition and make sure that we don't forget any of the key menu items and that we're making them right. So while this year's coming New Year's celebration may be a challenge, we're trying to figure out a way to share our favorite dishes from this special menu. And now to Ladana's family cookbook.
Hi, my name is Ladana Yumorikaku, and we had the pleasure of making a family cookbook. There are two versions, and this one is 19 years old. You can see that it was hand done, and the second one was done with a professional printing company. Our family recipes included traditional holiday recipes as well as people's favorites, but I like the other thing that we did with our cookbook, and that was adding some short stories. So different family members wrote a family memory, and in this one in particular also included a photograph of my grandparents. So a quick story, Bachan the Juggler by grandson Ron Yumori. In the early 1970s, Bachan was in the backyard with some tangerines. She said, "Watch," and proceeded to juggle those tangerines. To this very day and forever, I'll always remember her juggle. Another favorite of mine is from a nephew. He must have been about 10 years old. It's called Elephant Stew. So if you make this, you need a large elephant, you need a tub of brown gravy, salt and pepper to taste, and 2 rabbits optional. You cut the elephant into bite-sized pieces. This takes 2 months. You add the brown gravy,
video
cover,
there?
and season to taste. You cook it at 475 over a kerosene fire for about 4 weeks. This is sufficient to serve 3,800 people.
Oh.
If more guests are expected, 2 rabbits may be added, but only if necessary, as most people do not like to find a hair in their stew. All right, so I hope that I've encouraged you to consider making a family cookbook, and today you can actually do it probably digitally. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we want to hear from you. We love stories that help us understand the meaning and value of family or community cookbooks, as Nina and our chefs talked about. Do you have family cookbook or a story about one to share? Have community cookbooks influenced you or your family's lives somehow? Please enter your comments into the chat. And if you wish to use the audio feature and actually talk with our audience and panelists to share a very brief story about your own experiences with family or community cookbooks, please ask to do this via the chat so we can call on you and unmute you. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time remaining, so please do keep in mind that sharing a story in this way needs to be kept very brief and short. Well, I really do like LaDonna's story, but you do know that we're not promoting any harming any animals and of that kind and of that size. You know, the one story that I can think of for my family's involvement in one of the local church cookbooks is that my mom asked if myself and my brothers, we were both married, and asked if we could get our wives to submit recipes to the cookbook. And of course I said, sure. And I just kind of forgot about it because I was being really flaky. And lo and behold, later when the book came out, I saw all these recipes submitted in my wife's name, my sister-in-law's names, because my mom had put them in to save face. They are really good recipes though. So. No questions, oh my. There is a comment. It says, I love the idea of making a family cookbook and asking family members to write memories. So I wish that my family had done that. And I think that's a really good thing, an example that, we should take to heart. Okay, I do have a question. It says, over 30 years, this comment, over 30 years of the Nishida family reunions, we have created 2 family cookbooks. The second updated one last summer. Wow, that's really cool. Does the UI Chi have any plans? This is from Jen. Does the UI Chi have any plans to make a new community cookbook? Anybody from UI Chi want to take that on? How about Jane?
We don't yet, but although the lecture series binder is becoming kind of a general community cookbook for our committee. So those of you who've been to our lecture series events in the past, when you get the recipes from this event, you can add them to your binder. And if we get ideas for future cooking events, we'll continue to share those recipes. So maybe we can build a community cookbook one event at a time.
Thank you, Jane. I think that's what we'd hope would come out of this is people's interest in possibly doing other activities or programs like this, since we understand now why community cookbooks are so important, both for individuals, a family, and our entire community. So we're going to start our wrap-up process here. And if I could have the next slide. Oh, okay, great. So What's coming next? You will receive in an email recipes from the event, as I promised, a survey, give us some feedback and ideas for future shows and events, video links to some of our past ones, and a request for donations. Speaking about which, can I have the next slide? Please consider making donations to UI-KAI or the Japanese American Museum of San Jose, or maybe both at the same time. I think we all know that more than ever, this support is really needed with the pandemic closing things down and making it difficult to generate income for services and from in-person visits. Your help would really, really make a big difference right now and would be deeply appreciated. So please go to the UI-KAI or JAMsj donation website pages as shown on the slide. Perhaps somebody can type that into the chat for us. Next slide, please. We rely heavily on volunteers to make everything happen. So we have 3 slides of acknowledgements. First, we had a lot of technical support, as you heard us talking about, and here's our list to prove it. Thank you all to our wonderful supporters for making all these little videos possible. We also have music credits too. We're trying to be as professional as we can, but still be very community grassroots based. And lastly, this is our program crew for this afternoon. Thank you to Nina Ichikawa in particular. We're so grateful that she can help inspire this whole program and give us the whole context for making this possible. Okay, our last slide. We wish to thank and acknowledge all of you too for attending, sharing, and being supportive of our work. Why don't we all come back on the screen now? Because I think what we should do is give a real UI, JAMsj, bye, and thank you for everybody for coming. Everyone, please stay safe and don't forget to vote.
Thank you for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye.